When you're an operator, a pretty PowerPoint slide means nothing. All right. But an outcome is absolutely everything.
Hi there, welcome to Advising the Advisors, AI and Consulting Unlocked. Today, I have the pleasure to be joined with Mukarram Bhaiji, a partner at Bain Company. Mukarram advises clients on AI-powered pricing strategies with deep expertise in commercial excellence across consulting and corporate leadership role. Thanks for joining me today, Mukarram.
Thank you, Bo. Really nice to be here.
Awesome. So quick icebreaker, if you will. If you could have a conversation with any AI pioneer, past or present, who would they be and why?
I think that's such a great question, right? When Sundar Pichai came out and sort of said, AI is more profound than humanity discovering fire and electricity, I thought that was quite deep. But when I think about that, I think the person that I really want to sit down with is probably Alan Turing, right? He was just so ahead of his time, right? I mean, a lot of the work that he did has set the foundation for what is now modern AI, right? And he was a visionary in that respect. He was thinking about concepts and theorizing before the technology was there. You don't see a lot of that, right? A lot of the innovation you currently see tends to be with the technology we have rather than imagining something and waiting for the technology to catch up. So that'd be quite cool.
Yeah.
Spend some time with Alan.
Yeah, fair to say he'd be impressed with all the progress we've made since he was away.
I would expect so.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah, that's a very interesting answer. Okay, so let's kick it off with the easy questions, as you say. So first of all, just like high level, how exactly can AI help companies price better?
Well, if you take a step back, pricing is an outcome, right? Pricing is an outcome of when a value proposition, a client's need, and then the exchange of value kind of all comes together. Traditionally, pricing has always been, this is what it costs to provide a service, I'm going to put a markup on it, and I get to a price. Over time, pricing has shifted towards being much more value-oriented. So what is the value my product or service is bringing to a customer, and what is a fair share of that value I can take? And increasingly, as you drive towards more value-oriented pricing, the more data that you have, that gives you a better understanding of that customer's particular point of departure, what their need states are, how you're meeting that need relative to competing alternatives, the better the pricing outcome you can get. And that's where AI really comes into the mix, right? So AI brings the ability to democratize a lot of that data, gets it into the hands of the person who is having that dialogue, and therefore get to a better outcome. So I think before we sort of kick this off, I was saying data has been something that's been a mainstay for the pricing profession for a long time, right? AI is the buzzword now. It was machine learning before. It was data-driven decision-making before, and so on and so forth. So that's kind of been a mainstay, and AI is providing an opportunity to supercharge that, broaden and deepen it.
Do you think this time is a big enough push to incentivize them to finally again make the drive to cool, let's go clean up our data act finally, because this is the time? Yeah. Okay.
100%.
Have you noticed this tangibly in the interactions you're having?
Yes, because I think there is a real sense that there will be first mover advantages for people who kind of embrace this and do well, and I'll come to that in a second. And so it's no longer, if you like, an optional piece, right? When you think about, with the large language models, the use of Gen AI, and then bringing Gen AI and AI together in terms of effectively a tech infrastructure that's going to drive business performance, there are a few different areas of benefits that companies are starting to see, right? And traditionally was efficiency gains, and then you had speed gains, and ability to customize at mass, and then increase expertise and so on. In order for you to remain relevant in your industry, if you're not really tapping into one of those benefit bucket areas, you're going to get left behind, right? And that's the reality for a lot of companies, and so I would expect every board out there of every company is thinking about what impact that has on their business processes.
You mentioned again the concern about again some organizations like struggling to like scale pilots, like you said. Maybe you just like double tapping into that exactly. In this case, more from the leadership standpoint. Again, so you mentioned again some of the things organizations could do like to structure to make sure they're set up to scale pilots. Maybe it goes like if you could speak with again one of these boards, for example, that is like again stuck in pilot hell, if you will, one POC after one POC. What advice would you give at that level? Like again, of course, like this is like a very broad question, but like how would you like structure understanding what's going on there?
Yeah, I think you've got to understand what's causing that stuck in the rut with POCs, right? And I've had a few different conversations about this, and ultimately I think there are some patterns that come out. And one interesting one is that when companies started experimenting with AI and Gen AI and so on, there was a tendency to kind of do either what was easy rather than valuable.
Say more, like how?
So what I mean is, it's pretty easy to take a process that exists, think about how you might apply AI or Gen AI in order to automate parts of it, and you might drive an efficiency gain.
Okay.
It might not be the most valuable thing to do, because perhaps the more valuable thing to do would be to kind of take a step back, think about strategically where is it that we want to go, right? And then is there an opportunity to rethink that workflow, reimagine that process that is going to leverage AI, Gen AI, in order to get you to a step change in the outcome. So I bring it closer to home from a pricing perspective, right? So you're pricing today, and you're thinking about how am I going to incorporate AI, Gen AI, and effectively you throw that into your process today, and you're then wondering, well, it's actually not really driven a substantial benefit. I mean, it's not really working for me. Why is that? And then you look into it, and actually what's happened is you haven't really clarified how you want to price, which means that you've applied AI and automation to a process that was already suboptimal to begin with.
Right. Okay.
Right. So you've simply
automated
scaled, and codified something which wasn't doing that well anyway.
Broken, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. Yes, you might have got some efficiencies out of it, but ultimately the outcome is still largely the same. Whereas if you are to do what was more valuable, you would have taken the hardest step to sort of say, well, actually, is my pricing strategy right?
Right.
Right. Am I positioned right in the market relative to the value I'm bringing? Is my pricing model right?
Mm-hmm.
Made those hard choices, and then designed a process powered with AI to kind of go realize that. And that's the difference between doing something which is easy and doing something which is kind of valuable. And then I guess linking very much to that, the other pattern I see is a lot of POCs were focused very much what I would call as narrow use cases. So they were solving for a particular pain point somewhere, and they may well do a good job in solving that pain point, but individually those things are not needle moving. And so because they're not needle moving, they don't really kind of get the attention and the investment to kind of take them to the next level. And companies that have done this well is when they have thought about these use cases in a linked way. So if you think about what is the ultimate business outcome that we want to influence, and across that work process, what are the different use cases, and how do I now think about a constellation of use cases that I am going to optimize in order to drive an outcome? That's going to give you a much bigger bang for buck. It's going to involve many more users, and because of that scale, it is probably going to get more attention than the previous situation, and therefore there is a higher chance of it succeeding.
Exactly right.
You know, I'm seeing it change.
Okay.
I think naturally, as I was saying before, people started with the cost opportunities, right? Because they were here and now. Right, you could take a process, you could automate it, you could increase productivity by doing more with the same level of resources, because the AI tools were taking away a lot of the administrative processes, a lot of the information collation processes, and so on. So that made absolute sense. Increasingly, also as the technology is evolving, a lot of the large language models have evolved, the reasoning capability has improved, and so
Right.
on.
They can just do more now, to your point.
They can do more now, and they can do two things. There's better reasoning power, and with the advent of the agentic approach, there is more opportunity to have these models actually take action.
Exactly, right. And would it be fair to say that is that sequence important? Like, would you like suggest like, yes, like, bottom line is a bit like supposedly obvious, like, modestly ambitious, but you must start there to like set a baseline, because again, maybe it's easier to see returns quickly. Do you have any thought there on how the sequencing happens in an org that is open to doing both?
See, if you'd asked me this question a year ago, I would have said the sequencing is very important, because you need to do the cost stuff in order to fund the journey for the other bits.
Okay, interesting.
Right? Because as humans and as leaders in business, you always want to get runs on the board quickly, so to keep the excitement going, and then you build onwards and upwards from there. And for some companies, for some organizations, that's probably still going to be the right way of doing it, right? In terms of show early success, keep the excitement, and then
that momentum,
build on that momentum.
Okay.
I think with other organizations, especially as the technology sort of moved on, and you now have the ability to kind of do both in parallel, why not, right? I don't think you necessarily need to sequence it up. I think you can do both in parallel, and there should be enough ability and processing power and everything else that kind of allows you to do that.
I like that. Why not is the key word for 25 in AI in 2025. Okay, let's bring it closer to home here with your personal practice, right? Again, like I mentioned, you are a partner yourself at Bain Company. So let's start there. What has changed and hasn't changed in your day to day as the senior consultant in the doing the rise of AI?
So I think in terms of the core of consulting, I don't think that changes much,
okay,
right?
Because what is in that core? What is the
So for me, what consulting means to me is you're bringing a layer of critical thinking, strategic thinking. You are bringing an ability to help solve complex problems, and you're bringing some pace and rigor into all of that, right? That still holds true for me. What AI is doing is, if I think back to 20 years ago when I was starting off life as a junior consultant, I spent a lot of time collecting data, cleaning it, analyzing it, in order to build a fact base on which we could build recommendations. I think what AI does for us now is it does a lot of that faster, and gives us more time to think about what exactly the data is telling us, the synthesis coming out from it. So if I was to think about what has changed, I think there is more time to think about the answer than perhaps what we had before.
Right, because you're just spending all that time like gathering the resources, all the inputs you need. Interesting. Okay, I like that. So that has stayed the same, you say, right? Oh no, that has changed, you say.
That would be the change.
That'll be change. Okay,
right. Just in terms of the relative balance of time between creating the fact base to inform the answer to now having the fact base ready much quicker, so that you've got more time to think about the answer.
Yeah.
And I would hope that if you have more time to think about the answer will be better.
That'll go to my next question. Like, is there an obvious leap for you? But I guess right now it's still like, TBD. Okay, interesting. So that has changed. And what has changed the same, you say?
I guess that core stays the same.
Okay.
It's still a people buying people business, right? So it's still about relationships. It's still about being true partners with clients, so that you are genuinely invested in helping them succeed, rather than something which is more transactional. So those things are still the same, and I don't expect that to really change.
Yeah. That's an interesting one. You mentioned when you gave that answer about how like when you were starting 20 years ago, you spent so much time on like gathering information to like inform the answer. Let's switch to people in your shoes today. that are starting their journey today. Yeah. So like one the framing of the question I've heard is kind of like consulting is known to be kind of an apprenticeship craft, i.e. like, it's almost like a pyramid in the sense of like you have a base of people like yourself gathering the information, but like in the process of doing that, they're building the trade craft to then, graduate to become more senior partners. What happens in your world where, again, these people are starting without, needing to hustle, if you will, to gather all the information they need? Do you have any thoughts there as if it would be as productive, like, an upskill journey for them, or would even accelerate like how quickly they're able to like pick things up and like advance the ranks internally?
I know where you're coming from, right? I mean, like this is across all professional services. This is something that comes up quite a bit. So I have a slightly different view on that, right? Because if I compare the breadth and depth of data that we had when I was a equivalent of an associate consultant or wherever, just because what was available, it was quite limited. You are extracting stuff out of PDF reports, you are kind of relying a lot of internal data and so on and so forth, and you are using that, applying frameworks to kind of get to an answer. You have the data set that's available now is a lot richer. You have all of those things that you had 20 years ago, but now you've got potentially access to a whole swathe of unstructured data, which you can use these tools to kind of bring in. So the way I see it is that the universe of data on which you can run analytics and use that to build a fact base and drive answers has exploded. So the skill set required from the juniors coming up now and their ability to kind of deal with these different types of data and how you piece all of that together to get to a richer answer, that demand is higher. So I almost see all of this as a opportunity for them to become even stronger, better consultants than perhaps we were when we were coming up.
I like that. Yeah, it's because I guess it could be very self-serving to say like, no, the hustle is important. If you're not doing all the hustle, like gathering the PDFs, like, you're not really like going to be, again, as high quality consultant 20 years down, but like you're optimistic that no, actually them starting off with, again, like better tools, is like the only way up, you think? Yes.
The hustle doesn't go away though, right?
Okay, interesting.
Right, because let's think about what does the hustle actually mean, right? The hustle actually means in terms of getting obsessed with a problem, speaking to the right people, thinking about how you might break that problem up and sticking with it until you've kind of got to a point where there's a bit of satisfaction that you've kind of cracked it.
Okay.
I think that doesn't go away.
To your point, that's the core, yeah.
That's the core,
yeah.
Right? So the way you hustle will change because now, whereas previously you are hustling to collect primary data because it didn't exist somewhere, some of that data will now exist. You will use these tools to kind of bring in unstructured, structured data, piece it all together and stuff. And the need for the hustle will be more around how do you now go about kind of sense checking and validating and so on and so forth.
And communicating as well, like in a sense, like, you also be doing the synthesis and communication yourself to some level. Interesting.
For me, I think the one thing that experience cemented for me was that consulting is nothing if it isn't results. For you to be a long-term true partner for a client, there has to be an obsession with driving results, which means that it's less about spending 80% of your time getting to an intellectually perfect answer on paper and then handing it over and hoping it gets implemented, and is much more about get to something which is pragmatic and is going to drive results, might not be the perfect answer, but then spend 80% of the time actually turning that into reality so you see results in people, in their progression, in the P&L, on the balance sheet, whatever the right metric is for that specific situation. That pivot was something that I took away from my time in industry, because when you're an operator, a pretty PowerPoint slide means nothing.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
But an outcome is absolutely everything.
And again, like before that time, you had been a consultant before, right? Yeah. Okay. And are you able to like remember your state of mind before that? Like was there ever a time you thought, okay, perhaps the insights or like the aesthetic quality of like the intellectual rigor of the insights were enough? Like, do you recall yourself being in that previous state and updating like so drastically after being in their shoes?
I think it was a little bit more organic.
Yeah. Okay.
There, right? Because it wasn't something that it wasn't a switch. It hadn't
Okay,
something that
yeah.
I sort of had kind of realized. But
Yeah.
when you're on the receiving end
Mm.
of consulting work, and you stop to think in terms of, well, why isn't this hitting the mark? What is missing? And then you kind of realize, oh, okay, actually that's kind of what that gap is, and then that's the gap I need to fill.
Well, that's a lovely place to stop. Thank you for spending this time with me. It's been very insightful. Appreciate it.
Oh, it was a pleasure to chat. Thank you very much.